Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm W2Best and I make videos about tech, travel and inspiration. Today, finally, we're gonna have a look at the Dell Inspiron 15 7000 and make a 1-year review about the laptop. It's almost exactly been a year since I released my first unboxing video and then my 2-week review. And after a few months of using it, I did a 2-month review with a big questions and answers session. Now there's been another 10 months since that video was released, and I figured it's time to do a bit of a wrap-up review of how it's been to use this computer over a longer period of time, together with another Q&A session. So the video about Q&A got a lot of responses, and I will go through all the questions there and give answers to them to the best of my abilities. This video is a bit overdue, but there are good reasons for it. I decided to leave London and leave the lockdown to go back to Sweden, and I got a really nice new apartment in Gothenburg. I've been busy to set up the apartment both for living in it and for filming in it. I also decided to start a new business, which is a new digital marketing agency. There's been a lot to do with that over the last week. My first day was Monday last week. And of course there's a ton more to do with it, but I'm really excited to have this started and going. This video will refer back to quite many videos that I have made about this laptop before. If you want to see any of these videos, I will make sure to link to all of them in the description below, or you can have a look up in the suggested video section, where I will also put cards to link to these videos. I think in this kind of review, it makes sense to start where I would usually finish, and that is with a final recommendation. So after using this laptop for 1 full year, I've been using it as my main driver for all of this time, except during the time when I sent it in for repairs. At that time I was using the Acer Swift 5. Would I still have bought it if I remade the purchase decision today? And the answer is 100% yes. I think this is for sure the best laptop I have used during the last 10 years. And I've used a lot of laptops over this time, but there's always been big flaws to the laptops in one or other departments. And I think this Dell Inspiron 15 7000 is the first laptop I've had that covers all the basic needs and have some pretty extra special features that no other laptop that I've used have had. Still, today on the market, there are definitely not a lot of laptops that have 2 upgradable RAM slots, 2 upgradable SSD slots for a huge amount of total storage possible, then have a great port selection, including 3 USB-A ports and a Thunderbolt 3 port. This whole thing weighing in at 1.7 to 1.8 kilograms and not being that expensive. One of the big reasons why I really like this laptop is that it has such a good balance between power, portability, and general practicality. It has a great port selection, it is powerful enough to run really powerful stuff like video editing and gaming, while at the same time being lightweight, and you can use it with a USB-C charger to put up to 130 watt with one of the Dell's original USB-C chargers. Now that I have used it for about a full year, one thing that is super interesting to talk a bit more about is stability. Has it been running stable, or has there been problems along the way with the laptop, for example, dying or producing the blue screen of death, or not responding well to undervolting, or getting so hot that it thermal throttles while gaming, or getting so hot that it turns off, or anything like this? And actually, I think it's been running really stable, and the issues that I have mentioned and that I have made videos about are pretty much the only issues that I have had. Except that it's been running stable for all the different tasks I've been using it for. Video editing, gaming, productivity work, and just simple browsing, watching movies, using it on the go for train or plane rides with almost an unlimited battery life, it feels like at times. I've had such good use of this laptop for almost all the use cases that I'm using it for. The only thing that is not perfect is the on-the-go capabilities compared to the Acer Swift 5 that I was using for quite a while there when the Dell was at repairs. The Acer Swift 5 is 1 kilogram, and that means I'm pretty much bringing it wherever I go because I can barely even feel that I'm bringing it with me. This one that is 1.7, 1.8 kilos, I will feel it much more in my backpack, and therefore I will sometimes not bring it when I don't have to bring it. I think the Dell Inspiron 15 7000 is by far the most versatile laptop that I have seen on the market up to when I bought it and also the time after I bought it. With that said, I've had a few issues, and if you've been following this channel during this last year and maybe checked out my giant Dell Inspiron 15 7000 playlist that has about 30 videos in it in total, you've seen a pretty intense coverage of what the issues have been and how I have solved them. Already from the beginning, when I made my 2-week review video, I had a few issues. Mainly that Bluetooth was disconnecting, and that I had an issue with USB-C charging and finding chargers that was compatible. Moreover, I had an issue of connecting this laptop to my Thunderbolt monitor, which was an Apple Thunderbolt monitor. I haven't been able to resolve the problem of connecting to Apple Thunderbolt monitors, but currently I don't have the need to connect to one of these monitors, so that's not a big thing for me personally. However, both the Bluetooth issue and the USB-C issue was more or less immediately resolved after I have published this video. The driver update that I made for Bluetooth worked perfectly fine, and since I found compatible chargers that had the right wattage, I had been using USB-C charging pretty much exclusively and almost not used a barrel charger at all. That being said, I have had some small issues with USB-C charging, mainly when the laptop has moved down to a very, very low battery level. Then at times, I haven't been able to charge it with my USB-C charger. Especially this has been an issue with my HyperJuice charger, which I bought and unboxed quite recently, but since traveling has been banned, I haven't been able to make a full review of that one. It's never been a problem to the point that I have been unable to use the laptop, but it has been quite annoying at times when I'm at a super low battery level, I need to get work done, I plug in my charger and it doesn't charge. The other major issues I've had over this last 1 year is that the sleep mode has been really screwed up. This is something I made a few videos about, and the easy solution to this is that you just switch sleep mode to hibernate mode. When you do this, you get a bit of a longer wake-up time. When sleep mode is pretty much instant to wake up, hibernate takes about 10 seconds to wake the laptop when you open it up. I don't find this to be a big issue, so I'm sticking 100% with the hibernate mode so that I don't have the fans running and the laptop starting when it's in my bag and overheating when it's in a confined space like that. The other very obvious issue that has been is around the keyboard. Me and many other users have had an issue during this last year where some of the keys in the keyboard have stopped working. This is for sure the most annoying issue that I've had with the laptop over this last year. If you're not familiar with the issue, it was that all of the keys in this leftmost keyboard row, 1, Q, A and Z, stopped working and made it absolutely impossible to have a fluid typing experience because I basically had to copy and paste those keys or always bring and use an external keyboard. I had to send the laptop in to Dell and they repaired it and I got it back, and it has been working fine ever since that. It's one of the things that made me question whether I would completely recommend it even after this 1 year, because this issue has been such an annoying thing. But I think still, after getting it resolved and it's been working completely fine for about 6 more months, I am still willing to recommend the laptop, even though this is a bit of a quality control issue that has been from the beginning. The last kind of major issue that so many people have been asking about, so many people have been commenting about, and I made a lot of videos about, is the general heat management of the laptop. And this is definitely a bit of an issue. Out of the box, the laptop runs super hot. The CPU hits like 100 degrees immediately and it starts thermal throttling as soon as you do something heavier for the CPU. So a combination of undervolting and limiting how much power turbo can draw to the CPU has been very efficient for me to keep the temperatures down to under 80 degrees on the CPU. Making these changes also do impact the performance. However, I thought that it was worth taking a little bit of a performance cut to be able to have the laptop running significantly cooler, and therefore probably also making the lifespan of the laptop a bit longer when the components are not constantly pushed to like 100 degrees when you run a bit of a heavier task. The 2019 version of Dell Inspiron 15-7000 came with a few different configurations, and I went for the i5 version with the Full HD display and the 97 watt-hour battery with GTX 1650 graphics card. If I got to re-choose my specification, would I go for the same or would I decide to switch something up? Let's start with the processor. If I would get to choose between i5 and i7, I would actually have gone for i7 in hindsight. It's one of the things that you can't upgrade afterwards, and also both the i7 and the i5 seems to run hot approximately the same way, and this makes me think that the extra performance that you would get out of the i7 would actually be worth it when it's not running considerably hotter than the i5. In choosing between the 4K and the Full HD, I would still go with the Full HD screen, and that's for two different reasons. First of all, I really want as long battery power as possible. Taking the 4K screen would dramatically decrease the amount of battery life in the laptop, and I'm not willing to make that sacrifice. The second reason why I would prefer the Full HD screen over the 4K is that it's a matte screen when the 4K screen is a glossy screen. Even though the 4K screen is a bit brighter at 500 nits over 300 nits in the Full HD screen, I still prefer the 300 nit matte screen because I've had such big success with being able to work outdoors in it, even in very sunlight conditions. I also feel like the matte screen is picking up way less fingerprints than the glossy screen does, which is something that I saw when I made a comparison video about the Dell XPS 15 to the Dell Inspiron 15, where the XPS I was looking at had the 4K glossy touchscreen. The next thing I was looking into back then was whether I should get the 7590 or the 7591. And I made a video comparing these two models, and still I would say that I would 100% go for the 7590 every day of the week. 7591 has a few real drawbacks, and it's a pity that 7591 is the laptop that some of the bigger YouTubers have been covering, like Mobile Tech Review, and that they haven't got their hands on 7590 that has all the perks this laptop lineup has to offer. If you're not familiar with what those are, it's mainly that the 7590 comes with the bigger battery, the 97 watt-hour battery, and in most configurations come with a 1650 instead of a 1050 graphics card. It is also considerably lighter at about 1.7 kilos instead of 1.9 kilos in 7591 that has an aluminium chassis that weigh a few hundred grams more. There's also some naming confusion regarding the Dell Vostro 7590 compared to the Dell Inspiron 7590. And even I have been really confused about what actually are the differences between these. And I need to make a clarification there, saying that Dell Vostro 7590 and Inspiron 7590 are not exactly the same. The Vostro 7590 weighs about 200 grams more, similar to the weight of the Dell Inspiron 7591, and this is because it's a different material used in the chassis. Except that, everything else seemed to be exactly the same between the two models, even though the marketing is directed to a different consumer group. Now in 2020, there was a new model of Dell Inspiron 15-7000 just released. It's called 7501. And this one I made a video going through the spec to look at, is this actually a big upgrade, or is it maybe a little bit worse than the 7590? And even though this one has the 10th generation CPU from Intel, I think that it's actually a bit of a downgrade, especially since the model that I got of 7590 is not the top-end model. It doesn't have the 4K panel and it doesn't have the i7 CPU. If I would have gone for a non-top model of this year's edition, the 7501, I wouldn't have gotten a Thunderbolt port, because the Thunderbolt port is only available in the top model, the one that has the 1650 Ti. On top of this, in this new model you always have 8GB RAM soldered to the motherboard. So even if you upgrade it with another stick, you still can get up to 32GB of RAM, which is one thing that I see as a huge plus to be able to upgrade my laptop in the future. Another issue that I wanted to mention that I haven't mentioned before is that the screws have a tendency to come out of their screw holes here. So I've made a lot of upgrades, so I've been taking the lid on and off quite a few times, and I also sent it in to Dell for repairs, and I assume that they did the same. And for some reason it seems to be that the screws are not completely sticking into each screw hole. Every third week or so I've had to make sure that no screw is coming out on the bottom, and if they are, I have to just screw them back in so that they won't fall out. As I mentioned, and as you've seen if you've been subscribed to this channel, I made a lot of videos about this laptop. And maybe I have covered all the different aspects that are interesting to know about it, but I feel like there's still a few more things that I haven't covered and that I like to cover in the future. These are that I would like to make a repaste of the CPU to see if this can help with the temperatures. I've done a few different things around trying to fix the temperature issues, but I think this could be a major one that could long term be a big help to improve temperatures while under load. I would really like to test the laptop with an eGPU. I don't really know anyone who has an eGPU, and I don't want to buy an eGPU just for the purpose of testing it and then sending it back. So I'm still very keen to try with an eGPU and see how it performs and how it works if it's a smooth process. And similar to this, I would like to make more tests with docking solutions. So to be able to use this laptop with, for example, a one Thunderbolt cable setup, I would like to try a few different docking stations. One from Dell, one from Lenovo, and maybe one from a less known brand to see if they all work fine, or if there are some issues in regards to this. Especially since I had a bit of trouble when it came to using Thunderbolt with that Apple Thunderbolt monitor in the beginning of this review year. So before we move on to the questions and answers part, I would just like to raise this thing. Is there any real alternative to this laptop on the market right now? I've been looking very frequently to try to find something that would actually be able to replace this laptop, and still I have to say that I haven't been able to find it. I am interested in reviewing the Lenovo Slim 7 whenever it decides to come out on the market, but it doesn't have two SSD slots, which actually makes it quite a bit worse compared to the Dell Inspiron 15 7000. I was super keen to see the new iteration, the 7501, come to market, but with those things with no Thunderbolt port, less USB-A ports, and a soldered 8GB RAM stick onto the motherboard, I'm not that keen to upgrade to something like that either. And I have been looking at some of the gaming alternatives, but usually the gaming alternatives are not charged via USB-C. I was looking at the Asus ROG Zephyrus G14, which is a super interesting laptop. It does charge with USB-C, but only up to 65 watts. So if you have a 130 watt USB-C charger, which is the maximum that Dell sells, you still can only get 65 watts power into the Asus G14. And this makes it kind of impossible to play a game or do a heavier task, because the total power draw is going to be more than 65 watts. So you're still going to have your regular power brick with you if you want to complete a more heavy task. So I'm still on the lookout for a competitor that could be a good one to be my next review unit, and that I would be able to use for the next year from now on until the middle of 2021. If you have any suggestions for what this should be, please let me know in the comments below. I would really appreciate it. For now on, I'm gonna stick with the Dell Inspiron 15 7590, definitely the best laptop that I have used in the last 10 years. Now let's get into the second part of this video, the questions and answers session. There's been a lot of questions asked on my video where I was asking 4 questions for this video, and I'm gonna go through them all and show the question on screen and then try to answer it to the best of my ability. First up we have Rishi Ghosh asking, did your dual channel RAM frequency get reduced to around 2400 MHz after you installed your second RAM module? I didn't know about this, but this is a yes. My RAM frequency was reduced to 2400 MHz and it's not running the full 2666 MHz. I'm not sure why that is and I haven't tried to fix it, but it is running at 2400 MHz dual channel. David O'Sullivan asks, I'm close to buying one of these as the value seems good and some models are upgradable. My issue is trying to figure out which model offer the most upgradability. I want to upgrade both the RAM and the SSD. I'd like to buy an i7 with 8GB of RAM, 512GB SSD, and in time upgrade both, and need Thunderbolt 3. If you can get the config with i7, 8GB of RAM, and 512GB SSD, I think that is the ultimate configuration. Make sure that it also has the 97 Wh battery, because then you can get up to 32 gigs of RAM. You could add, as I have done, a 2TB SSD or maybe even two 2TB SSD if you want to completely max out your storage capabilities. In total, I think the i7 processor is what you want to go for, then you can upgrade both RAM and SSD afterwards. Hi, have you got the 90W or 130W AC adapter? And does your AC adapter make buzzing sound when laptop is off and fully charged? Eventually, does your AC adapter make coil whine? I have the 130W power adapter. The original power adapter, the Dell one, is not making any noise or any coil whine. However, I have had some weird noise when I've been using some of my USB-C chargers, but I figured this is more up to the chargers than up to the computer. And with the original charger, there hasn't been any of these issues. Ahmed Kaba asks, hey, how is the fan noise on this machine while doing simple tasks or heavy tasks? Are they constantly on or are they pulsating? And how are the thermals after all these updates? Does it get too hot? These are 2 very relevant questions. First of all, the fan noise, when you get the laptop, for me it was pretty much constantly on. It was not a pulsating like on off. It was getting turned on straight away when you open up the laptop, and then there was more or less a constant fan noise. With the modifications that I have done, with both undervolting 125 millivolts and applying a limit of how much power the turbo can draw, I have a pretty much silent laptop with all the tasks I'm doing, except when I'm video editing or gaming. And that's when the computer actually runs hot, so of course the fans should be running. But for example now, I'm doing a screencast and I'm looking at these comments on YouTube. And there is no fan noise at all coming from the laptop. Arnold Vitols, I am literally on the verge of buying an Inspiron 7590 with the exact same spec. I've already placed an order, but one aspect bugs me, the i5. Have you ever come across the situation where you wished you had an i7 instead of i5 because it lacks power here and there? As far as you've described, your daily laptop tasks are mostly the same as mine. As I said earlier in the video, yes, I have definitely been in cases where I wish I had a bit more extra power. Especially this is because I haven't seen that there are more issues with thermals on i7 compared to i5. So if I could change at this point, I would definitely go with i7. But of course that also comes down to what price they are, the 2 different configurations. Pat asks, how is durability, flexing keyboard ports? How is the battery after 1 year? I'm concerned about key travel and how it compares to Dell Latitude. I will have to go find one in the store. These are some great questions. I think that the build quality, still after using it for 1 year, is great. I have no problem with keyboard flex, I have no problem with flex in the screen, and I think overall the build quality is really good. The one thing that I've had a bit of a problem with is that the attachment of the lid is kind of flimsy at times. This might be because I've been upgrading the laptop, but sometimes when I push or hold it to the edges, I feel like it's not really sitting exactly where it should. I think this is kind of a thing when you don't have a unibody design, that the pieces are not sticking together 100% perfectly. The screen is not flexing a lot at all. And there's not a lot of flexing when you push down hard on the keyboard, which is very common on a lot of laptops. The battery life is still really good. I haven't seen any real downgrade in it over the course of this last year. And when I look in Dell Power Manager, it still states the health of the battery as excellent, and that hasn't gone down at all over this one last year. Sads11D asks, how is the heating? And does it thermal throttle on heavy performance? As I have mentioned and showed in a few different videos, it definitely does thermal throttle if you don't make modifications to it. You need to unvolt it. You probably also need to limit turbo a bit if you want it to not thermal throttle at all. That does limit performance a bit, but I think it's worth the sacrifice. The thermal management is one of the weaknesses of this laptop, and if that is your highest priority, I think this is probably not your main machine to look at. Sashidananda Mohapatra asks, do you plan to repaste the CPU and GPU as it runs slightly hot? I remember your RAM upgrade ran into some issues. Was that due to CAS latency difference or something else? I plan to do a repaste at some point, although this is a bit outside of my comfort zone and I've never done it before. So when I do it, I have to feel that I'm 100% sure that I think it's worth it. If I would screw something up, I wouldn't feel very happy at this point. The issue I had when I upgraded my RAM was that when I just inserted a RAM module, the extra one that I bought, in the free slot, it wouldn't start up. But when I swapped the positions, then they would start just fine. I don't know what CAS latency difference is, so I can't answer that question, but this was the issue and this was how it was resolved. Jeremiah Teo asks, do you know if we can upgrade to Wi-Fi 6 card and how we go about doing that? The Wi-Fi card is swappable, so it should be perfectly fine to upgrade to a Wi-Fi 6 card, and this is something that I might be doing at some future point as well, and in that case I will for sure make a video about it. Janek Patel asks, the hinge is already pretty smooth but very loose out of the box on my unit. Is this normal? And does it loosen more over time? Well, I think the hinge is definitely not loose on my unit. So here's the thing, like, you can definitely open it with one hand and there is still some friction in it, but it's not like heavy to open it, but it's far from a loose hinge. So if you feel that the hinge is actually loose, I think it's worth looking into if you might have gotten a faulty unit. Second question, the Bluetooth on my unit is malfunctioning. Since the last 2 months, it doesn't let me add or pair any devices with it. I believe the problem started with a Bluetooth driver update from Dell. I rolled back the drivers. Anybody else having any problems with this? Any fix for it? I've tried everything short of replacing the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth card. Well, the only problem that I had with Bluetooth was in the very beginning, and then after updating the drivers, it's all been fine. So unfortunately I can't tell you any fix for this as I haven't run into any proper issues with it, but it sounds like your laptop has some weird things going on with it, and it doesn't sound like this is perfectly normal. Maybe you should look into checking with Dell if this is a problem that you should get it repaired for. Nigel Allen asks, is there any much difference between Vostro and Inspiron? Inspiron currently run out in Australia and there are good deals on Vostro with nice spec. Well, there is this one difference, and it is that the chassis is different, so that the Vostro will be approximately 200 grams heavier than the Inspiron. Except that everything else is the same between the two machines. Anbin Nguyen asks, would the i7 model's performance be worth the extra $400 compared to the i5? I'm a university student and I'll be using the laptop for scientific computation. I think that the i7 would be worth the upgrade. It's a little bit of a steep price change, but since the CPU is one thing that you can't upgrade down the line, I think if you have the money to spare, I would definitely go for the i7 version to get that extra power. It could be worth it just for the longevity of the machine and make it as powerful as possible. Sergio Suyi asks, noise after undervolting in standard work. I would say that in standard work, the laptop is completely silent after you have undervolted it and applied this limit to turbo. If you only put the undervolt, there is still definitely some fan noise and it starts the fans at some weird places. But when you have applied both of these two changes, it's pretty much always silent. Is 150 millivolt the final result for undervolting, or can you go down more without getting an unstable system? I would actually not go as far as 150 millivolts. When I've been running the computer for a longer time with 150 millivolt undervolt, I have had a bit of issues and it has crashed a few times. So I decided then to go down to a 125 millivolt undervolt, and with this setting I've been completely stable all the time and had no hiccups at all. IPS panel bit depth is 6 FRC or 8 bits. This I actually don't know what it means at all, so if anyone else can answer the question, I would be super happy. Michelle Avila 6 asks, a year later, would you buy it again or would you move to another PC? As the MSI Prestige 15 with a better CPU. I definitely already concluded that I would absolutely buy it again 1 year later. And I have been eyeing the MSI Prestige 15 for sure. It does have that extra SSD slot that I think is very valuable, especially when you work with video editing a lot. But not mainly for the CPU, but just for like the overall form factor and the fact that it has 2 USB-C ports, so you can use one USB-C port for charging and still have one USB-C port available for connecting to a monitor, for example. Anurag Singh asks, is it too heavy to carry everywhere in the campus? It's definitely not too heavy. This is one of the lightest 15-inch laptops that I have ever used, and if you're used to carrying, for example, an XPS 15 or any other 15-inch laptops, this is definitely a lighter one. Domagoj Pavic asks, I bought the exact same laptop 6 months ago. All in all, happy about it, but I have one issue that drives me crazy. And then explain a Dell docking station issue with audio drivers and video drivers. Unfortunately, I haven't used the Dell docking station, so I can't really give you any feedback on this issue. I would like to use these docking stations a bit more moving forward, and then I will make some videos about it to see if I have any issues or if it works smoothly. Apostolos Velstin asks, did you manage to add 32 GB of RAM? Does yours also get very hot? I haven't tried to add 32 GB of RAM. Right now I'm quite happy on the 16 GB that I'm using, but there might come a point in the future where I might add 32 GB, and then I will also make another upgrade video about that process. It definitely does get hot at times. Still, with my modifications, when I run really heavy tasks, it gets a bit hot to the touch when gaming or when performing heavy video editing, especially in the rendering process. But I don't think it's a huge problem, and it's definitely not as hot as my MSI laptop that I used to use before. Labrifax asks, have you had any issues with the processor or video fans? My processor and video fans started making constant rattling noises, and my Inspiron would overheat and turn off. Error codes would appear every time I turned on the laptop. I contacted Dell about this and they are sending some new parts. I was wondering if you had any similar issues. I haven't had any of these issues at all. However, with my MSI laptop that I used before, the GS73VR, I had almost an exactly similar problem, where the fans would turn to like crazy rattling noise and it was just impossible to use the laptop in any form of public space. I went with it to a repair shop and they took out huge balls of dust. It was so much dust in the fans that you won't believe it. So I would definitely take it apart and have a look in the fans to see if there's a lot of dust that had gathered there. Rattling noise from the fans is probably because of dust in the fan. Renel Cuesta asks, what should we check on the laptop when we first get it? This is a really good question, and I haven't really covered this, and I think I might make a separate video about just this. When you get a new laptop, what should you check from the beginning? I think you should definitely check that you don't have any backlight bleed around the edges. You can Google backlight bleed check, and then you can go to a service that gives you a full black screen so that you can like go into a darker room and see if there are any light edges appearing around the screen, and see if there are any problems around backlight bleed or IPS glow, as you sometimes call it. Check around the edges, check in the middle as well, just see if there are any lighter spots that are not supposed to be there when you're on a black screen. Second of all, I will definitely check around the edges to make sure that there are no sharp edges and no kind of flexing or like weird noises going when you press around the edges like this. I've had a little bit of issues with this, but it hasn't been any big thing. But this is one thing I would definitely control. And then just overall, use the laptop for a while and see if you run into any kind of problem. Usually there are though the display problems and the hard edges problems that I think you should look out for in the very beginning. Osama asks, I want to buy a new Dell Inspiron 157590 with the i7, 8GB of RAM and 1650, and it's priced $950. Is it good at this price, or are there any other options for the same price range with same or better specs? I think that is an insane specification for that price. And just as you make sure to get the 97 Wh battery and not the 56 Wh one, it will be such a good laptop for the price. It's almost like a steal. This is something that you don't want to miss out on for sure. Sergio Suye asks, please add a small review about webcam quality and sound quality for Skype Zoom. Is it with IR for face recognition or without? This is the quality of the webcam in a decent lit condition. I have all the roof lights in my apartment lit up so that there would be something equivalent to daylight, although this is definitely not as bright as daylight. But this is the quality of the webcam, and I think it's sufficient enough, but it's not amazing by any means. It is not an IR camera though, so you cannot use it for Windows Hello. And my computer doesn't have a fingerprint reader either, so my computer is not enabled for Windows Hello at all. I always need to enter a passcode when I need to get into it when I start it. Renel Cuesta asks, has the keyboard quality and experience deteriorated at all? No, it hasn't for sure. I mean, I had those issues with the keyboard that I had to send in to Dell to get fixed. But except this, it's still a very nice keyboard experience, and both the regular keyboard and the numpad works perfectly fine. I'm really happy with the amount of travel there is and the amount of activation force that these keys take to be activated. Anbin Nguyen asks, what are the parts available for the Inspiron 15 and what parts stores would you recommend? I haven't really been looking for parts that are specific for Dell, but I just imagine that if you want Dell specific parts, you can go to the Dell website to get original parts. But you can probably also find non-original parts on eBay and other similar marketplaces. However, like when you want to upgrade RAM or SSD, any original part goes since it's standard parts. But if you want, for example, to buy a battery, I would probably buy it straight from Dell. Apurva Mandwekar asks, how is the gaming performance for extended periods, because I have heard of it having thermal issues. Please include this in the video. Also, how is the panel? Is it bright enough? I have done quite an extensive gaming test video, and I will link it up here in the suggested videos, and also I will link it in the description below. It is really fine to do longer gaming sessions on. I've done up to several hours of gaming straight and I haven't had any issues at all, given that you do these modifications that I've been mentioning several times. You need to undervolt the CPU and limit a bit how much power the CPU can draw for turbo. When you've done that, I've had really good performance for gaming for longer sessions. The panel is definitely bright enough for everyday use, and since it's a matte screen, it's also very good for outdoor use without having too much issues with reflections. However, it's not a super bright screen, so if you come, for example, from a MacBook Pro, you'll probably not find this screen very bright, and you might want to have a look at it before you decide to purchase this laptop. Joseph Brian Semafranca asks, is the display good enough for photo and video editing? So I have the full HD model, and I think this one is absolutely sufficient for my needs, but I'm not that much of a pro. I'm not that much of a pro with video editing or with photo editing. So I don't need the perfect color calibration to be able to reach the results that I want. If you need much better color quality, if you need the perfect color calibrations, I would go for the 4K panel as it has a higher color accuracy. Ricardo Michelotto asks, question for the next video, have you ever considered an upgrade of the Wi-Fi Bluetooth card with something more powerful like an Intel One or Killer AX1650? Is it worth it? I haven't really considered it because I have had no issues at all with Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. If I would have had issues or if I wouldn't like the performance at all with the components I currently have, I might have considered this. But I might just, because I want to upgrade the Wi-Fi speed in the future, do an upgrade to a Wi-Fi 6 card. If that happens, I will for sure make a video about it in the future. Brandon B asks, do you believe that repasting will make a noticeable difference? Brandon B asks, do you believe that repasting would make a noticeable difference to CPU-GPU temperatures? I definitely believe it does, and there's been a lot of people that try doing this and they've had significant results to the temperatures. Max Audio Pro, best EQ profile for listening to music / overall. I actually don't really use the EQ function at all. I don't think it improves the audio that much, so I kept it at some kind of standard setting and really don't mess around with it that much. Do you experience Bluetooth stuttering, skipping when connected to Wi-Fi? I do, and I don't know how to fix it without turning off Wi-Fi. I haven't experienced any of those issues at all, so that sounds like quite a strange thing and nothing that I have experienced in any point. Did you undervolt the GTX 1650, and if so, how? I haven't tried doing that, but you can probably go into MSI Afterburner and do it there. However, I haven't had any issues with the GPU running very hot, so I haven't really considered undervolting the GPU. Undervolt settings you use regularly and to game with. I use a 125 millivolt undervolt to the CPU and the CPU cache, and I use a 49.5 millivolt undervolt to the Intel GPU. I use these for all the different tasks that I'm doing. I have it constantly set to these settings. Is XTU the best undervolting software? I think that XTU is super smooth to use, and since it saves the settings and you don't have to start it up or auto start it for it to apply the settings every time you start the machine, I think this is the best experience with undervolt softwares. Does yours have a fingerprint reader? When I ordered my Inspiron 15, the fingerprint reader wasn't available as an option, so therefore my laptop does not have the fingerprint reader, unfortunately. Does NVIDIA Auto-Select graphics work as it should? I haven't had any issues with the NVIDIA Auto-Select messing up. It has been working really well for me, and sometimes with my other laptops that I've had, like the old MSI, it would mess up, but I haven't had any issues with it with this Dell computer. I can't read this name, but the person asks, when I lift to wake up my 7590, it takes about 10 seconds to get ready. Does it happen to your Inspiron? Yes, since I run it in hibernate instead of sleep when I close the lid, it takes roughly 10 seconds for it to wake up. If you want it to be instant, you have to be on sleep mode instead of hibernate. But this also means that probably your laptop will be running the fans and kind of be on even when it's closed, because of this really annoying connected sleep feature that is a part of Windows 10. Jeremy Andrews asks, I've had my Inspiron 7590 for about 6 months. I purchased it to be my business laptop plus video editing. Generally a good laptop, however the thermal characteristics of the laptop makes it impossible to get the best use out of the i7. I can't run it higher than 2.4 GHz without throttling due to high temperature. I fiddled with undervolting. I've ordered a cooling pad, but seriously wish I'd done more research before buying, as the specs amount to false advertising. Well, this is definitely one of the main things about this laptop, and one thing that I have covered in my videos from the very beginning, that it does run really hot and it will thermal throttle if you don't set it down. You need to unvolt it, you need to apply this limit to turbo boost, and when you do that, of course you lose some performance on the way. I still think that it's a worthwhile trade-off. I've still been able to run the tasks that I'm most interested in doing without having any real performance downs to it. Happy Sunshine asks, does your Vostro get hot to the touch when it's on charge? Mine is with a 97 watt-hour battery. So I haven't had any particular issue with it, but of course it gets a little bit hotter when you plug it in because it needs to push power into the battery. But not that it gets burning hot or anything, just a tiny bit hotter to the touch than what it is normally when I run it off of battery power. Thank you so much everyone for posting these questions, and thanks to all the people that have also been super active in replying to these questions. Since I've been a bit slow in releasing this video, I'm super grateful to all the people taking your time to answer people's questions and to provide your insights from owning this laptop and using it for about as long time as I probably. If you have any other questions to me about this laptop, I would be really happy to answer them in the questions down below. Usually I'm quite fast to get back on comments, so make sure to write something if you have any questions that hasn't been answered in this video. And if there by any chance is any video that you want me to make about this laptop or about anything else in regards to laptops in general, please let me know in the comments below as well. It will be really helpful to get your input on what content you want me to create moving forward. If you haven't bought this laptop already and you're interested in picking it up, there will be a few links available in the description below so you can find where to buy it. I'm W2Best, I make videos about tech, travel and inspiration, and I will see you in the next video. Have a real nice day. Bye bye.